The joke was supposed to be nothing, a throwaway line at the end of a frustrating company meeting, the kind of thing you say when exhaustion makes you reckless and the person across the conference table has just spent 45 minutes dismantling every proposal your team worked on for 6 weeks. Marcus Holloway had not meant it seriously. He had not meant anything by it at all. But when the words left his mouth, well, if you're going to run my life this completely, you might as well just move in with me. The room went silent in a way that made his stomach drop straight through the floor, and Vivian Alcott, CEO of Alcott Meridian Group, the most composed woman he had ever stood in front of, had looked at him for one long, unreadable moment before closing her portfolio and saying, "Meeting adjourned." He had driven home that night, certain he was going to be fired by morning. He was not prepared for what actually came instead. If this story already has you feeling something, that mix of dread and curiosity and the quiet hope that something unexpected might actually change a person's life, then please take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs a good story today, and subscribe to this channel if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that the most life-changing moments often arrive disguised as mistakes. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We genuinely love knowing. Marcus had been a single father for 3 years, 2 months, and what felt like 1,000 lifetimes. His daughter Rosie was 6 years old and believed firmly that dinosaurs still existed somewhere deep in the ocean, that her father made the best grilled cheese in the Northern Hemisphere, and that the world was fundamentally a safe and loving place. Marcus worked every single day to make sure that last belief never cracked. He worked at it the way other men worked at marathons or financial portfolios, with discipline, with sacrifice, and with a kind of quiet desperation he never let her see. He had taken the senior account director position at Alcott Meridian because the salary was real and the hours were supposed to be manageable, and because after everything that had happened with his ex-wife Kara, who had left on a Tuesday with 2 suitcases and a note that said she needed to find herself, he had needed something solid to stand on. The job was solid. Everything else in his life was held together with the emotional equivalent of tape and good intentions. He was not the kind of man who made jokes in boardrooms. He was careful. He was measured. He was the person other people pointed to when they wanted an example of someone who kept it together. Which was exactly why, when the words came out of his mouth that afternoon in conference room 7 on the 22nd floor, every single one of his colleagues had turned to look at him like he had suddenly started speaking in tongues. He had been tired. He had been up since 4:30 with Rosie, who had a nightmare about something with too many teeth and had climbed into his bed and then stolen all the blankets in her sleep. He had driven to work with coffee he forgot to finish and a permission slip he nearly forgot to sign. And Vivian Alcott had spent the entire meeting looking at him with that particular expression she wore. Not unkind, not cruel, but precise, the way a surgeon looks at something that needs to be corrected. And something inside him had simply given way. He did not know much about Vivian personally. Nobody at the company did. She had taken over Alcott Meridian from her late father 18 months ago and had promptly reorganized 3 departments, replaced 2 senior vice presidents, and introduced a quarterly review system that everyone hated and grudgingly admitted was effective. She was 34 years old. She wore structured blazers and spoke in complete economical sentences. She did not attend the office holiday party. She did not make small talk by the coffee machine. She was not unkind, but she existed at a remove from everyone around her, like a planet with its own gravitational field that kept other things orbiting at a respectful distance. Marcus had admired her competence while simultaneously finding her meetings almost unbearable in their intensity. And then he had made the worst joke of his professional life directly to her face. He spent the drive home constructing his resignation letter in his head. He spent dinner pretending everything was fine while Rosie told him about a boy in her class named Percy who had eaten an entire crayon on a dare and had turned out to be fine, which she considered a scientific miracle. He read her 2 chapters of her book, listened to her prayers, which included a request that dinosaurs be okay wherever they were, and then sat on the couch in the quiet of his small rented house with his phone in his hand, waiting for the email that would end his career. It did not come that night. He fell asleep on the couch with his phone on his chest and woke up at 2 in the morning, stiff-necked and confused, shuffled to bed, and lay there staring at the ceiling until his alarm went off. The next morning arrived gray and heavy with rain. It was the kind of rain that didn't come down so much as hang in the air, a fine, relentless mist that soaked through everything slowly and without drama. Marcus got Rosie ready for school, dropped her at the gate, watched her run inside with her dinosaur backpack bouncing, and then sat in his parked car for 4 minutes doing nothing before driving home instead of to the office. He told himself he was working remotely. He made coffee. He opened his laptop. He stared at his inbox and found nothing from Vivian or HR and didn't know whether to feel relieved or more anxious. He was still in his gray sweatshirt, the one with the small paint stain near the hem from when Rosie had decided the back fence needed to be purple, when he heard the knock. It was not a loud knock. It was deliberate and measured, 3 clean raps, the kind of knock that belonged to someone who did not second-guess themselves. He set down his coffee cup and walked to the door and opened it and stood there in the rain-gray morning light, looking at Vivian Alcott standing on his front porch in a green wrap dress that the mist had begun to darken at the shoulders, her hair slightly damp at the edges, holding nothing, no briefcase, no portfolio, nothing. Just herself, looking at him with an expression he had never seen on her face in any boardroom. She looked uncertain. Not lost, not afraid, but uncertain in the way a person looks when they have made a decision they are still in the process of believing in. He did not speak first because he was not capable of it. His brain had simply stopped processing in any useful way. She spoke instead, and what she said was not what he expected. She did not talk about the meeting. She did not mention the joke. She said that she had been driving past his street for 20 minutes before she knocked, and that she was aware of how strange this was, and that she had something she needed to tell him that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with the fact that she had spent the previous evening sitting alone in her apartment on the 31st floor of a building where she did not know a single neighbor's name and had found herself thinking about what he had said, not because it was inappropriate or funny or unprofessional, but because it had sounded, underneath the exhaustion and the sarcasm, like something true. Like a man who was tired of being alone saying so out loud without meaning to. Marcus stood in his doorway and felt something shift in his chest the way tectonic plates shift, slowly, deeply, with consequences that would take time to fully understand. He stepped back and held the door open, and she came inside. She looked around his house the way people look at places that tell them something real about a person. The crayon drawing of a purple dinosaur taped to the fridge, the small sneakers by the door with the Velcro straps still open, the stack of children's books on the coffee table beside a half-finished cup of apple juice, the photograph on the side table of Marcus and Rosie at the beach, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. She stood in front of that photograph for a moment and then turned to look at him, and her expression had changed again, softened into something that sat uncomfortably alongside everything he thought he knew about her. She told him things in that kitchen over coffee she hadn't asked for and then drank anyway. She told him that her father had built Alcott Meridian from nothing and had handed it to her 2 weeks before his diagnosis and had died 11 months later, and she had spent every day since then trying to be worthy of something she had never asked to carry. She told him that she was precise and demanding in her work, not because she was cold, but because she was afraid. Afraid that if she stopped holding everything tightly, it would come apart, and there was no one waiting to help her put it back together. She told him that she lived alone and ate dinner alone, and that the last person who had asked her how she was and actually waited for the answer had been her father. She said all of this without drama, in the same clean, complete sentences she used in presentations, and that somehow made it more devastating, not less. Marcus listened. He was good at listening. It was something Kara had never believed about him, had accused him of faking, but it was the truest thing about him. He listened, and he heard not just the words, but the space around them. The things she was not quite saying, that she was exhausted, that she was lonely, that she had come to his door because something in his terrible joke had reached her in a place she had kept very carefully locked. He told her about Kara. Not the whole story, not all at once, but enough. He told her about the note on the kitchen counter and the Tuesday that had rearranged everything, about learning to braid hair badly and getting better at it, about learning to be both things at once, the provider and the comforter, the disciplinarian and the safe harbor, and how there were nights when Rosie was asleep and the house was quiet and he sat with the weight of it so completely alone that it felt almost physical, like something pressing on his sternum. He told her that Rosie was the best thing that had ever happened to him, and also the reason he had not allowed himself to want anything else. Because wanting something else felt like risking the one thing he had gotten right. They talked for 2 hours. The rain never stopped. At some point, Marcus made more coffee, and Vivian sat on his couch with her shoes off and her legs folded beneath her, and looked more like a person than she had ever looked in Conference Room 7. And Marcus sat across from her in his paint-stained sweatshirt and felt, for the first time in longer than he could calculate, completely present in his own life. When Rosie's school called at noon to say there was a half day due to a water main issue, Marcus went to pick her up, and he did not know what to expect when he came back. He half expected Vivian to be gone, to have reconsidered, to have retreated back behind the professional distance. He came through the door with Rosie on his hip and found Vivian in the kitchen washing their coffee cups, and Rosie looked at her with the total unguarded openness that 6-year-olds deploy like a superpower and said, very seriously, that she liked her dress because it was the color of a dinosaur. Vivian looked at this small person who had materialized in her afternoon and said, just as seriously, that she had always thought green was an underrated color. Rosie considered this and then nodded and said that they were probably going to be friends. Marcus watched this exchange from the doorway, with his heart doing something complicated and inconvenient. The afternoon unfolded in ways none of them had planned. Rosie insisted on showing Vivian her dinosaur drawings, all 14 of them in chronological order, narrating the evolution of her artistic style with the confidence of someone presenting at a gallery. Vivian sat on the floor and looked at every single one and asked questions. Real questions, not the performed interest of an adult humoring a child, but genuine curiosity. The same precision she brought to quarterly reviews now turned toward a 6-year-old's theories about why the Brachiosaurus was clearly the most underappreciated dinosaur in popular culture. Rosie was completely undone by being taken seriously. She bloomed like something that had been waiting for the right conditions. Marcus made lunch. It was nothing impressive. Grilled cheese, because it was what Rosie wanted, because it was what he was best at. And when he set the plate in front of Vivienne, she took a bite and said it was the best grilled cheese she had ever eaten, and he thought she might actually mean it. He understood then that she was someone for whom honest praise was a deliberate act, not a reflexive one, and that made it worth more than 100 easy compliments. By the time the rain had thinned to something softer and the afternoon light had turned the color of old gold through the kitchen window, something had settled between the three of them, quiet and unannounced, like the way a piece of furniture finds its right place in a room, and suddenly the room makes sense. It wasn't love, not yet, not in the way stories rush toward. It was something more careful and more durable than that. It was the beginning of trust being built between people who had both learned, in different ways and from different kinds of loss, that trust was not something you gave easily or all at once. Vivian left before dinner. She stood at the door in her green dress with her shoes back on and her composure mostly reassembled, and she told Marcus that she owed him an apology for how she had run the previous meeting, that she had been pushing too hard and not listening enough, and that she intended to do better. He told her that he owed her an apology for the joke. She looked at him for a moment and then said very quietly that he didn't, actually, that it had been the most honest thing anyone had said to her in a long time. Rosie appeared between them in the doorway to say goodbye and to extract a solemn promise that Vivian would come back to see the rest of the drawings, the ones she hadn't gotten to yet. Vivian made the promise without hesitation, and Marcus, watching her make it, understood that she was not someone who made promises she didn't intend to keep. He stood on the porch after her car had disappeared down the wet street, and the evening settled around him, cool and clean after the rain, and felt something he had almost forgotten the texture of. It was hope. Not the desperate clutching kind, not the kind you talk yourself into, but the quiet, organic kind that grows in the space where two people have been genuinely honest with each other and found, against all reasonable expectation, that they are not alone. He went inside and helped Rosie set the table for dinner, and she chattered about dinosaurs and Percy and whether the ocean was big enough to hide a brachiosaurus, and he answered every question with his full attention and thought that this was what his life was. This small, warm light of a person and this house and the work of showing up every day, and that for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. It felt like more than enough. It felt like the beginning of something. He did not know then how the story would go. He did not know that Vivian would come back the following Saturday with a book about prehistoric marine creatures for Rosie and a quiet nervousness she tried to hide. He did not know that over months and seasons the distance between their two lives would gradually, carefully close. He did not know that Rosie would eventually inform them both, with the absolute authority of a 7-year-old who had thought it through, that it made more sense for everyone to be in the same house. He did not know any of it yet. All he knew, standing in his kitchen with the dinner plates warm in his hands, was that a joke he had made out of exhaustion and frustration had somehow cracked open a door he hadn't realized he'd been standing behind for years, and that a woman in a green dress had been brave enough to knock on his door the very next morning, and that life was, occasionally, more generous than you had any right to expect. Some things don't begin the way stories tell you they should. Sometimes they begin with the wrong words said at the wrong time in a gray conference room on a rainy afternoon. Sometimes they begin with a knock on a door you didn't expect, from a person you thought you understood and didn't, not really. Sometimes the bravest thing anyone does is simply show up. Before we reach the end, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling us the one word that describes how this story made you feel. Just one word. We read every single one. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you that loneliness is not a permanent address, that people can surprise you, that the right thing sometimes arrives disguised as a mistake, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear that second chances are real, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Your support keeps these stories alive, and it means more than you know. Marcus Holloway had not meant to change his life with a joke, but the best things rarely arrive the way you planned them. They arrive in the rain, at your door, when you least expect it. And they are worth every uncomfortable, unscripted, terrifying moment it took to let them in.